Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the second day of the 2021 Innovation for International Development Expo. We are so glad that you're here with us today. I'm going to keep my comments short because we have a lot to get through and we want to leave the panel with as much time as possible. My name is Rhonda Hahn and I work in Global Engineering Programs and Partnerships. Together with the Shah Family Global Innovation Lab, we host the I2D Expo every year to provide a forum for professionals, students, and faculty to learn from one another. Today's agendas include the Career Opportunity in International Development panel and poster awards. If you have questions for our panel, put those in the chat and we will get to as many of them as we have time for. A registration link for our May events will also be in the chat. And our moderators today are Abhi, Ajmani, and Edwin Kpodzro. They are with the GRID group, and we will link to their website as well. This group is open to both graduate and undergraduate students. Okay, so now I will turn it over to our moderators, Abhi and Edwin. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the second panel session of the I2D Expo. Edwin and I will be the moderators today, and just to quickly introduce ourselves, I'm Abhi, a PhD student in the Innovation Science Lab of Purdue.
And I'm Edwin, also a PhD student in Mechanical Engineering, as well as Ecological Sciences and Engineering.
So we are both part of the leadership team of the student organization called GRID, which stands for Graduate Researchers for International Development, and in which we are dedicated to building a strong collaborative network of Purdue student researchers and professionals involved in developmental work and societal impact. So today, we are extremely delighted to have among us our expert panelists who come from some of the top organizations involved in domestic and international development and will bring to us a depth of perspectives from their rich and unique backgrounds. As for the structure of the session, we plan to ask our panelists about 3 to 4 questions, and then we'll open the floor for audience Q&A. Over to you, Edwin.
Thanks, Abhi. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We have with us today 4 out of our 5 panelists. I think the other one might be having some connection issues, so we'll go ahead until they're able to join. So we have Dr. Brian Bingham from USAID, Ms. Charlene McKoin from Ag Connectors in the Netherlands, Dr. Dale Whittaker from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and last but not least, Tom Purekal from the Pulte Institute for Global Development in Indiana. So could you each take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce yourselves? Tell us a bit about what it's like to work in your respective organizations, as well as what your typical day looks like. And we can go in the order shown on the slide, starting with you, Brian.
All right. Nice to be here. Thank you all. I did not start as a development practitioner. My PhD is in pharmacology with an emphasis on neuroscience. And I did a PhD and then 4 years of a postdoc studying the impact of stress on the brain development in rats with respect to affective disorders. So like, nothing that one would originally think about international development. But when I realized that being an academic wasn't for me, I found out, I thought, well, what else do I want to do with my PhD? What are other options there? And I always appreciated policy. And so I found out about the Science Policy Fellowship, the AAAS Science Policy Fellowship, and was able to get involved with that. Again, not really initially thinking about international development, but liking the idea of having the government pay for me to work internationally and travel. I interviewed with USAID, State Department, and DoD. And one of the offices at USAID that I interviewed with was the Center for Development Research, and which the name has now been changed. But the idea behind it was using data and research to inform how international development happens. And since poverty is the main stressor for humans, I thought, okay, maybe there's a little bit of a link there between what I did. And so that's how I got into USAID, and I've loved the opportunity to work with people like Ewan and Tom and Jennifer over the years, and understanding a wide variety of different development fields and research and professors, and connecting that to policy and applicability. In terms of what my day-to-day looks like, a lot of time on phone calls, a lot of time on emails, coordinating people and monitoring. I do a lot of program management over the years, award management, helping to review applications for awards, connecting our partners together, and making sure that everybody follows and then doing on strategy design and development for new programs at USAID, briefing staff, and occasionally some good thinking work of sitting down and writing documents.
That's awesome. We also found out that you like to create your own ice cream flavors.
That is true. That doesn't have much to do with my work, but my cinnamon hazelnut it's a really good flavor. I love it.
That sounds awesome. Thanks, Brian. We'll move on to Charlene.
Oh, okay. Charlene McKoin. Let's see, I did not come out of an academic background. I did go to university. I have a master's degree in international affairs. And even though between college and or university and grad school, I did spend some time down in Brazil and worked with some people from the Rockefeller Foundation. So that was my little bit of an introduction to the world of development. But it was short, it was sweet, but I liked what they were doing. They were working on livelihood development in poor communities in Bahia, which is Salvador Bahia, in the north central part of Brazil. So after that, I decided, okay, I wanted to learn more about policy. My idea was originally to join either the State Department or to work for USAID, but I ended up as a banker. I ended up first in New York City working for Morgan Guarantee. And eventually I moved out to California, worked for Wells Fargo, and then for Bank of America. So for more than 20 years, almost 25 years, I was in banking and had very little connection with development. But as I mentioned to Edwin, I think that actually benefited me in the long run as a development practitioner. After about 25 years in banking, one too many mergers and acquisitions, and I got burned out on that whole. I didn't want another boss or a new boss in the same field. So I ended up going to Africare, and it was completely by chance. The woman who was head of HR was a friend of my sister's, and she happened to be looking for someone to run Mozambique. And I knew very little about development, but just knew some buzzwords from my days in Brazil, and was able to talk them into hiring me. And that's how I got started. From there, I went to Cardno Emerging Markets, one of the Beltway bandits, and Apt Associates, both of which were a great education. And I worked on some good projects, mainly USAID. And then I went to the Gates Foundation. From there, I'm semi-retired. I belong to a network of agricultural development practitioners. It's a worldwide group, very small. Most of us are retired or semi-retired, but we try to help where we can. So my day-to-day activities are more or less solving problems, helping people write proposals, Right now, I'm talking to TOT, which is funded by the Gates Foundation, and the African Development Bank is the primary donor. And we're working on how to bring their innovation platforms to the private sector more effectively. So that's the kind of thing I do during the day. I find projects to work on, or projects that need help. Some are paid, some are not paid, but again, just I want to help.
That's wonderful. I can imagine you probably took a bit of a pay cut moving from the banking industry to development, maybe.
Yeah, it was, but not, it wasn't an enormous pay cut, especially once you start working abroad, because when I worked abroad, I was, I didn't have any place to spend my money. So most of the projects that I worked on, they paid my housing or gave me a car or whatever. So even though it wasn't quite as lucrative, I didn't have to pay as much in tax. And these are all things that people need to consider, because you can just put that money away for your retirement.
For sure.
And most of these organizations, whether it's an NGO or one of the consulting firms, actually the consulting firms don't pay that badly, and they usually have 401ks and IRAs that you can put your money in.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you, Charlene. We'll move on to Tom now.
Great. Well, thank you, Edwin, and all. Keeping in the same vein as my colleagues just who preceded me just now, I also did not start my career in international development. After graduating undergrad, I went on to work in advertising. And for brands that some of you probably never even heard of, Sucrets, throat lozenges, contact cold medicine, Geritol. At some point, I was promoted and got to work on Pringles and a couple of other cool brands. But I thoroughly enjoyed my experience advertising, and ultimately did have an opportunity to work with some strategic, brilliant people overall, and learned a great deal. But then, as chance would have it, I ended up leaving advertising to go work at a childcare facility in Honduras. As a volunteer, I was there for 2.5 years, similar to kind of like a Peace Corps-ish experience. Thoroughly loved that and realized that this is kind of where I feel I'm being pushed and called to go in terms of my career, and kind of more long-term vision for how I want to spend my life. I did, after I came back to the United States, I ended up going to, well, I actually went back to the private sector for a small bit, and started a company down in Honduras, and but then secured an MBA. So didn't really have that more development background, even academically, as I went on. But I found, again, my MBA was very helpful. And then I went on to work with Catholic Relief Services for 10 years, and working in contexts like India, South Sudan, Myanmar, and a lot of sub-Saharan Africa overall, in sectors such as food security, water sanitation, humanitarian response, peace building, governance. So learned, again, a ton, and appreciated many of the strong technical people and strong managers that I worked with with Catholic Relief Services. My role at that point was still kind of more as a project manager, similar to what Brian was saying, involved heavily in areas such as project design, and managing staff, but also this concept of strengthening organizations, local organizations, and trying to think about how to sustain the efforts and the effects of the work and the interventions that we were doing at the time, into ways that could be more locally appropriate and effective going forward. So much of our work was really focused in this area of organizational capacity strengthening. After that, I left Catholic Relief Services, moved back to the United States, and I currently work for the Pulte Institute for Global Development, which is fantastic. Again, I would say 70% of what determined how much I would enjoy the profession or the career or the job that I was working in was the people that I had the opportunity to work with, whether it was with local partners or my colleagues now at the Pulte Institute. I'm exposed to some really strong technical people at Notre Dame. Again, I'm kind of in this area of project management, and have a chance to cultivate a team now and do some really cool and innovative work with people like Brian and Jennifer and our colleagues on the Laser Pulse Consortium, as well as some other really exciting projects that we're working on. So day to day can change a lot, but it's still kind of in this area of trying to cultivate teams and strengthen local organizations and local systems.
That's wonderful, Tom. It sounds like you've had to wear several different hats at one time or the other, but looks like you've worn them well. So we're glad to have you. We'll move to more of a domestic front now with Dale. So Dale, if you wouldn't mind going now, yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Happy to, thank you. Let's see, just quickly on career path. I did graduate work at Purdue in agricultural and biological engineering, so that's my link to you. And I was a faculty member there for 13 years, faculty member and administrator in both the College of Ag and in the Provost's office. During that time, before I was at Purdue, I was at Texas A&M for 15 years, really working on safe foods and on environmental modeling. And during that time, I set a personal mission for myself to end hunger and heal the earth through education, through other people. And that's really what kept me focused in the world of higher ed. I spent 35 years in higher education, finishing or leaving as a university president, provost before that for 4 years. And during the last 10 years or so, my personal mission statement shifted to lift lives and livelihoods at scale, because I understood, I believed that education is a key to economic mobility, and it really is one of the strongest keys to economic mobility. And for me, that was where my skills lie. I've been working with the Gates Foundation for 2 years now, and full-time as an employee for less than a year. So let me tell you a little bit about the foundation. I like it. I like it a lot. And the reason is because I work with, in a group that works with 3,300 colleges and universities. I work with a small cohort of those that have national scale and are rapidly growing. And the interesting part of that is that they're the ones that are creating equity the fastest, especially where people live in education deserts, which in the United States is 60 million of us. They're also working well with people who started college, but the way that college is designed to work has been for so long, doesn't work for a whole lot of people. And so these are people that have some college but no degree, about 35 million of those in the United States. And you know, the simple fact is there's a tremendous amount of talent there, and these aren't dumb people. You know, these are people for whom there are other life priorities at different times in their lives, and picking up and going somewhere without income for 3 or 4 years just will never work for them. So that's kind of the focus that I work on. I work primarily in educational equity with a focus on Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and people that are in homes with experiencing poverty. So that's the focus. Let me tell you a little bit about the Gates Foundation quickly, because I think that's most interesting to this panel. I find it, so I'm a newbie. Charlene may have more experience than I do. I find that it's pretty bureaucratic, more so than I expected it to be. Having said that, it's focused on long-term market level trends. So it's not so much about projects as it is about trying to shift conditions over the long term. it may be one of the few organizations in the world, and others like it, not just the Gates Foundation, but foundations that are truly global, that really are positioned to have a global impact. And what I mean by that is they don't have governments to report to. They can work with and facilitate, but they are not accountable to governments. They're not accountable to shareholders. They have one mission, and that's to give away money and do good by giving it away. And most of the bureaucracy that I'm talking about is answering the question, was that investment of our philanthropy, did it really make the difference that we thought it would make? And if not, what can we learn from that? So day to day is trying to convince the people within the organization that have decision-making authority to put tens of millions or hundreds of millions into specific projects, running those projects, and then reporting back on how they turned out and asking for more money to go toward similar projects. I work in higher ed, which is the United States division. We don't do much work around the world in terms of education. It's mostly domestic, but we do have gender rights, women's rights portfolios. We have ag development portfolios. We have health portfolios that are global.
Awesome. Thank you, Dale. And I will hand over to Abhi at this time to proceed with the second question. We want to leave enough time for Q&A at the end. So if panelists could keep some of the answers to about 2 to 3 minutes, then we'll give the audience time to engage with you. Thank you. Over to you, Abhi.
Edwin, I'm not sharing my screen very quickly. Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. So the second question is, what, according to you, are some of the biggest problems or challenges in your respective fields that need immediate attention, and what advice would you give to student researchers from that perspective? And we can start with Charlene.
Okay, that's a good question. It's changed over time because I'm in a completely different spot right now. But I'll go back and touch upon some of the things that Tom was saying, because I worked for a foundation that I considered, you know, one of the best places you could work in terms of their mission. And having been someone who operated either as a project manager or a chief of party doing government funded projects, what I found at the Gates Foundation is you can have much more flexibility. I always told our grantees, hey, if it's not working, come and talk to me. You know, let's figure out what we can do. And sometimes when you're working with USAID or DFID, that's really hard to do because of all the people they have to report to, like Congress. So that's a problem, but that doesn't mean that there still isn't an issue with politics and bureaucracy. You know, I was very naive when I went to the Gates Foundation. I thought, oh, finally, you know, I'm in what nirvana, but there are still politics. There's still going to be things that you have to do just because you've got to, I hate to put it this way, but you got to play the game. You know, and it's still, though, such a great way to work. I've also been able to follow the IKEA Foundation here, which is headquartered here in Leiden. And I have a very good friend who's a senior person there, and I'm discovering the same kind of thing. A lot of flexibility and granting, but oh, here's another issue too that comes up. Sometimes you get new leadership and your mandate is changed. And it could be literally 1 week you're supposed to be engaging more local organizations. The next week they want you to work more with private sector organizations. So there's a lot of that philosophical changing. But again, when you're working for something like the Gates Foundation or IKEA Foundation, you do have some influence. You can say what you think and try to get people to change their minds. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it did.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, politics, bureaucracy are great points. And I've heard some of my other folks also talk about this this problem, if you will, that exists probably in a lot of the big organizations. So thank you. That's a great point. Next, we can move on to Tom, if you can give us some comments about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, where to begin, right? So I think one of the big things that I struggle with, and I see the industry struggling with right now, is how to not pigeonhole yourselves into almost kind of pre-designed interventions, right? So how do we think about a process and processes that can allow us to be more innovative and creative and much more interdisciplinary. I think some of the big problems that I find is that we try to create solutions to problems, but ultimately your solutions end up reflecting the traits or the characteristics or the qualities of the people in the room, and may not be getting the kind of or allowing the full breadth of possible solutions to become manifest and reveal themselves. So how do we think about this in ways that are more out of the box? And it can be difficult. And I think a lot of the work that we're doing, and that I know that Purdue has been doing a lot on, is in terms of systems level analysis and looking at ways to strengthen systems, pushes and is continuing to push us, and hopefully will continue to do so, to think more about how do you get different people in the room and think across sectors, and come up with solutions that are more comprehensive and holistic. And it can be difficult when you have your own niche and areas where you may thrive as an organization, or your donor comes in, or the people who are funding you come in with kind of a predetermined strategy. And so how do you help influence some of these decision makers early on, and think about that larger ecosystem of actors that are involved in this larger process, which is time consuming. And then also making sure that as you're making decisions, that they're based on evidence, which I think is really important for student researchers to keep in mind, and that really valuable role that you play within this larger ecosystem of being able to bring real data and evidence base to help inform these decisions on how you might, and what solutions might be able to kind of be thought of to move forward with, to help address some of these really big complex issues that the world's trying to and is struggling with right now.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. That's a very rich insight. In fact, one of my peers, her name is Monica, she's actually working in this field. We are in the Innovation Science Lab, and people usually tend to have a confirmational bias. In complex problems, they just look at the problem from just one angle. And as you pointed out, a big comprehensive view is super important, and which I think is a great point. So thank you. And next, moving on to Dale, if you could answer that. Thanks.
Sure. I think I would ask the question why, at least in the United States, is only 1 out of 5 people in a rural area, does 1 out of 5 people have a college education, and it's lower when you look globally. In urban areas, it's over double that. And I think you could answer that probably with tradition and access. So when any institution starts maturing, it turns from an external focus toward a self-preservation and self-measurement focus. And higher education's done that, I'd say, for maybe at least 60 years, 70 years in the United States, where often universities measure themselves by how other universities perceive them. Faculty measure themselves by how other faculty perceive them, which is very different than asking yourself, how many people need an education that Purdue could provide And if that's 200,000, what does it take to get there? We have technology, we have behavioral sciences, we have a number of answers to some fairly straightforward design questions. I think often the question is, do we have the will and the business model motivation to unleash that talent where it exists? So the question here about what is one of the biggest challenges in higher education, I would say, is access, but you have to ask why access is a challenge. And I would say an answer to that is we haven't really challenged we haven't really challenged the question about system design. And I think there are quite a few engineers on this call, so I think that it's an interesting question for this group.
All right, thank you. That was some great insight about system design in higher education. I really liked how you connected both of them. And next we can move on to Brian, and then we can also look at one of the, I see a question in the chat related to that, and we can look at that. Yeah, Brian, what do you think, Brian?
I'll just briefly reiterate some of the things that Tom has said. There are so many challenges that we're working on, and so many different things and challenges within challenges. If you do a study of systems dynamics, you know, there are these grand challenges that they don't have specific, many of the challenges in international development don't have specific solutions or clear solutions, and require a variety of actors. And so I think that like in health, getting people to take their medicine, and specifically preventative medicine, and understanding the human dynamics under the behavioral economics underlying adherence to medicine is incredibly challenging. And so I think one of the things that graduate researchers can do, similar to what Tom said, is work on the skill of putting your research and your data abilities in context. Understanding who the players are, understanding their different interests, and being able to subdivide your mind so that on the research side, you know, where you have to have very controlled circumstances in these environments under these assumptions, here's the answer. Okay, how does that fit in the bigger picture? And then being able to communicate and understand the I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, the interests that other stakeholders have in that context, both political, behavioral, who your beneficiaries are, what your end goal seems to be, and then leveraging your experience with data to be able to identify where you can build and put in different pieces of that puzzle is crucial, and will lead to people using your data better and more often for decision making, because you're able to put it in context for them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Looking at the big picture and seeing where does your solution fit into the interest of different stakeholders and in terms of the general impact of your solution is, I think, a really, really good point. So next, I see one of the chats, a couple of questions coming. So I guess we can take these questions in the end in the interest of time, because we're already halfway there. So Edwin, please, over to you.
Thank you, Abhi. Yeah, so I think a lot of our questions also tie in, a lot of the questions from the audience tie in directly to our final question, which is, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned so far? And what are some of the most important skills that you apply on a daily basis in your respective roles? What skills have been the most beneficial to you? We can start with Tom.
Great, thanks. At the risk of sounding cliche, I have to say, one of the things that I keep learning is how much I still don't know. When I went into Honduras in this childcare facility, I went in as this cocky advertising executive who had done all this strategy work and thought, yeah, I'm going to get this place in shape within a year, no problem. And I just realized how much I needed to learn about working with people, the kind of the challenges and the issues that the local population was facing, that the kids in this particular risk group were confronting, and how I had no idea how to deal with these issues. And then over the course of my career, just being able to check myself and realize that even the approaches or the ideas that I bring to the table come with a bias based on my own experiences and just the all the inputs that have helped form me and the way that I define myself. And so it's been really important and super beneficial for me to be able to bring in other voices, people who are going to disagree with me and challenge me. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits that we have in terms of this concept of diversity is not just that you have a good mix of people in an audience for or in your team just for reasons of meeting certain thresholds or quotas, but the fact that if you bring people in with the same value systems and who all kind of think in the same way, you're going to get to decisions much faster. And you might seem like your decision-making process is very efficient. But then if you bring in other people with different perspectives, different value systems, your decision-making will take longer, but you're going to get to more rich and I'd say just higher quality decisions that will be more inclusive and consider a whole spectrum of issues that you probably wouldn't have thought about otherwise. So I think that's one of the big things I'm taking away from at least my career at this point in my life.
Absolutely. Sounds like the learning curve is progressive. Would like to remind all attendees to please mute yourself so that we can hear our speakers better. Thank you. I will move on to Dale. Dale, could you tell us what are some of the important lessons you've learned and what skills you continue to apply on a daily basis in your role?
I really liked what Tom said, and that is surround yourself by different perspectives and understand that robustness is not always streamlined. So to get to a robust, imaginative solution requires people that don't think alike. The other thing that I would say that I've learned is that life kind of happens, and it happens in chunks. You don't know how long those chunks are going to be, and it's often not what you plan. And so an interesting question is, so what do you control to go where you want? And I shared with you a personal mission statement, but I think what I would suggest is imagine what impact you want to have in the world in some way. And then in every job that you have, just keep leaning and looking for opportunity in that direction. And my father used to tell me the most important job you will ever have is the one that you have right now, not the one that you want next. So doing a good job of what you do is really important. And what do I mean by lean in the right direction or in the direction that you want to go? I put in the chat, every job has some mundane kind of junky work in it, filling out papers, reporting to people, evaluating employees, stuff that you might really, some people like it, maybe some people don't, different things. And then every job is going to have something that really makes your soul sing, hopefully. And if you find that is only 5% of your job, you need to keep keep walking, excuse me, keep looking for that next thing. But you're not going to find the job where it's 95%. Very, very, very rarely. So if you hit 60-40, where it's 40 mundane and 60 fun, you've got just a super sweet job. And then the last thing I would say, especially to people who are starting their career, is careers aren't lifelong jobs. What they are is a trajectory of 2 to 3 year packages and stories that start building a story about what you believe in. You probably will not work for the same employer. None of us have, I don't think. But you will start to discover, as you make choices, natural choices towards your North Star, you'll start to hone in on that place where you can really be a difference maker and have impact.
That's spot on, Dale. I've been having a conversation recently about how really our careers consist of what we like to do, and they're not who we are, in the sense that it can change, whether it's an employer or even the space that we find ourselves in. It's okay to change direction, and so long as we keep our eyes focused on what the goal is. So that's really helpful.
And Edwin, and know who you are, and continue to build your strengths and resist the American urge to remediate your weaknesses. Just find someone else to work with that you love and respect that has those strengths.
For sure, we work better together. That's awesome. Thanks, Dale. What do you think, Brian?
I don't have much more to add to what Tom and Dale have said. I would just reiterate well, I guess I do. For me, coming out of academia, I had the data skills, I had the critical thinking skills. What I didn't have were the engaging with people skills, and recognizing that even though I may be the smartest person in the room, it didn't help the project moving forward for me to make everybody else feel like I was the smartest person in the room. And so being able to work with people and being able to value people and work on a team and recognize how to work on a team and recognize how to manage up, how to manage down, and to not be a jerk. Those were how to empathize, how to listen to somebody that may be feeling something that you think is ridiculous, and then incorporate their feelings into that project is really crucial. Because in the end, international development is a people business, and being able to marry your analytical mind with the social skills to be a pleasant person to work with is something that I've been trying to develop for the last 6.5 years. So.
Well said. Thank you. We'll wrap up with Charlene on this question, and then we'll move into some more of the audience questions. So Charlene, if you have anything to add.
I do have a few things to add, although a lot of what I wanted to say would reiterate what each one of the other speakers, the use of cross-functional teams. You need people who are going to beef up those areas where you either know nothing or very little, or you're just wrong. You've got to learn to manage, especially if you want a long career in development, because it's good to manage projects, quite frankly. And the next part, I think it was Tom that talked about behaviors, human behavior, and I want to really emphasize that everyone should get out of their ivory towers and get out into the field. Get your derrieres out there talking to the people that you're trying to help, because if you don't, you're just going to make mistake after mistake. I work a lot with researchers who, if we build it, they will come. And I can tell you, I've worked with thousands of farming groups, whether it's co-ops or even individual farmers, and every time we were trying to sell them on, oh, you should use this kind of seed and these fertilizers and you'll double your crop. Every single time I was asked, who's going to buy it? Where it's and you would think, well, you're going to double your yield. Get out there and just do it. You're going to be able to feed your family. And they're going, it's a lot of work. It costs them money, and you need to understand from their perspective. So I really do think that that you need to balance all of the knowledge that you gained in academia, in even doing your research. All of it is necessary, but if you don't start talking to the people that need it, you're gonna start creating things that they don't want and that they don't need, and it won't move forward. So that's one of the most important lessons that I can add to this conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. I think we'll move into some audience questions now, starting with, again, since this is a career panel, we have a question from Diana Harbison, who works in the GEPP office. She was posing it to Brian and Charlene, but if anyone else wants to jump in, that would be okay too. Diana's asking if you can give concrete examples or ways in which students can sell themselves in their resumes and during interviews that would resonate with employers that you have worked for.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this quickly. You have to understand the industry that you're going for. So in government, for example, so in academia, it's the formula for setting up an abstract for a paper is big problem, little problem, very specific, narrow problem, our research question and answer. And that's how we're designed to think. Government doesn't think that way. In government documents, it's here's the big solution, the final takeaway, and then if you're interested, here's some of the background. And so being able to understand how your target communicates is really important. So as you're going into an interview, government is very results focused and it's context focused. So creating experiences for yourself to where you're able to demonstrate the skills and the results that you've articulated, and then saying that up front, as well as being very responding very specifically to the questions and things that are asked in hiring for government jobs. There's a science around working around USA jobs, and I can dive into that deeper. But like I said, part of that is understanding how to transmit your message appropriately for that audience.
Charlene?
Yeah, two things. One is volunteer. I know everybody hears this all the time, but I have a lot of respect for people who were in the Peace Corps. I also respect people who maybe they go and volunteer in Honduras. Do it as to get the background while you're young and you can live with some of those hardships, because you're going to know quite a bit about, again, the people that you want to help. You're going to have insights that you can use your academic background to help solve. But I would really just say volunteering if you want to go straight into development. The other side, the flip side of this is get a job in the private sector. Learn what business is about, because especially in the systems-oriented world that we're living in now, a lot of the work that I do looks at markets as drivers. The private sector as a way to improve all kinds of things. Getting more IT in the ag sector, getting more finance in the ag sector. It's all about what does the market want? How can we help small farmers? And this is, I'm not someone who knows very much about the health sector, but that's in my area, that's what we do. So we really need to think about that connection. And again, understanding who you're working for, who your beneficiary is really important, what their needs are, as well as having the experience where you know how to help pull in the researchers, the academics, you know how to talk to government, but you also know how to talk to the private sector, because the private sector is very much involved in development these days.
That makes sense. Abhi will proceed with the next question. Thank you, Charlene and Brian.
All right. Dale and Tom, or Brian, Dale or Tom, do you have anything to add, or we can move on to the question about opportunities? Let me share that.
Yeah, actually, if I could just add just a couple
sure.
things. I like what Brian and Charlene said very much. I definitely agree. Get some field experience and do it while you're young, because it becomes that much more difficult if you have families and whatnot, right? So that's very valuable. I will say also, attention to detail, really important. It's just kind of unfortunate how many things get missed by people that shouldn't, and can eliminate errors kind of later on in the process. Resilience is another big thing, and being adaptable. There is no job, at least I've never, in the careers that I've worked in right now, where you know exactly what you're going to be doing day one, and that stays with you throughout that job. The whole issue of international development and project management means that you're going to have a lot of fires that are going to come up. And some of these things you're going to be able to see in advance, and other things you just won't have any control over. And the history will remember those who stood up to those challenges and really said, no matter what, we're going to get this done, right? And kind of moving forward. So
Abhi, my pragmatic recommendation would be just around the job itself. Read or listen very carefully for what they want to have done. And then the second question is, then what does it take to do that? And then map that and start there. Don't start with anything else. And then map that to your story, your evidence of things that you've done that would provide evidence that you can do what they need done to get there.
Okay, yeah, those are some really, really awesome points. Thanks so much, Tom and Dale. And I guess we can move on to one more question. Let me share my screen. Right. Okay, so the question is, what kind of opportunities are there for students or early professionals in your respective organizations? And it'll probably be unfair to not ask this question in such a panel. So anyone who wants to take a crack, and I guess we have until 11:10 to go on. So please.
I'd be happy to jump in there because I'll be quick. With the Gates Foundation, we primarily fund intermediaries. So we would fund other NGOs and organizations around the world that hire people. There are a few jobs with the foundation. They tend to mostly be senior or temporary jobs. So I would say, look at the intermediaries that have received consistent support, because like any organization, the foundation has relationships and groups that they have a history with and trust. Look at those intermediaries for the jobs.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point, because if you go to the Gates Foundation website, right now they say that they need a minimum of 3 years of experience before you can actually work directly in the organization. And I think what you're saying probably resonates well with that.
Yeah, and frankly, if you look at those jobs closely, they're more clerical type jobs and mission related jobs.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you.
USAID is very similar. There are, for people with PhDs, I mentioned earlier the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. That's how I got in. I say I often feel bad because there are hundreds of people who have suffered through years of Peace Corps trying to get into USAID, and I just kind of snuck in the back door. So You can find opportunities like that. Also the Presidential Management Fellowship, or for faculty, the Jefferson Science Fellowship. Those are both ways to get your foot in the door. There are very few entry-level jobs that come up. Hardly any for undergrad, more so people with master's degrees that can be found on USA Jobs or on the USAID website. But career positions are very few and far between for early level, entry level. But there are government contracting, staffing contractors who provide a large portion of the entry level positions to USAID, where we have policy analysts or entry level positions that we hire other contractors to fill, and then those contractors fill them, and they're technically employees of those contractors who then come into USAID and work in the building with us as contractors. They get treated mostly like regular USAID employees, and then once your foot is in the door that way, you can find other positions that are just advertised internally. But then, as Dale said, most of our work is we fund other people, and so working with people who are implementing USAID projects is a great way to gain some of that experience, get some of that field experience, especially that Charlene and Tom and Dale had mentioned, and then come into USAID later as more of a mid-career professional.
Thank you, Brian.
I would like to,
yeah, sorry,
if I can, just add to that. There are some of the contractors that Brian was talking about, I have worked for, and I think that they are good places to start. There aren't a lot of jobs, but it will depend on where, how much USAID is spending in any given year. But the apt associates, the Cardnos, DAI, there are a lot of these. Most of them are headquartered in and around Washington, D.C. They will be kind of entry-level jobs, but they're always looking for people, especially people coming out of good academic backgrounds. Somebody with a PhD is at least going to get their resume looked at, and that I can assure you. And they always need people who are willing to staff field jobs. Be a deputy chief of party or a program manager or whatever. So that is one way to get in. Work for one of those organizations, and the pay isn't really that bad. There are also NGOs, some very, very high quality NGOs that there are a lot of high quality NGOs, but there are the TechnoServes and the ACDI VOCAs of the world are very focused on business, among other things. You've got Catholic Relief Services. There are a lot of them. And again, they will give you the field experience while paying you. And most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, they're going to be working for USAID. And through those jobs, you're going to meet lots of other people that work for other institutions, and you'll be able to start building your network. Because in the end, with the exception of the Gates Foundation, every job I've ever had, even in my banking industry days, was through a connection. A network person who said, hey, there's a job available, I'll put your name in or whatever. So your network is always going to be really important. So you might as well get out there in the field and start meeting the people who do this work.
Yeah, that's a great point. Networking it also showed up in the panel session yesterday. It's funny. And yeah, I mean, they were like, you don't even know how a new opportunity really knocks on your door through networking. It really amazes people. Anything to add, Tom?
Yeah. I mean, I completely concur with everything everybody said, with the exception of one thing that Brian mentioned in terms of slogging through the Peace Corps. I will say that most people probably enjoyed their Peace Corps experience and see it as an asset to their career overall. And I thoroughly enjoyed my experience in Honduras. Can't imagine my life if I had taken another direction in that sense. So, so all that to say that if you have the opportunity to do something like that, grab it. I would completely endorse it wholeheartedly. And as Charlene was saying, like, yes, get into the field with one of these organizations. Field experience, so valuable. And it's one of the easiest things to have access to. The field will always be there. And they're always looking for good people with these organizations. So I'll add Chemonics to the list as another big contractor that's really strong. They do great program management. You'll learn a lot with these organizations, right? And it'll make you that much more marketable going forward. So, and just echoing also what people said about networking, I mean, when I think about every job that I've jumped into, it's always been through a connection. I've never cold called an organization and received a job that way. So,
what was the name you said about? Was it Communicator? I missed that.
Chemonics.
Okay, sorry.
I can type it into the chat box.
Okay. Thanks,
There
Tom.
are a lot more of those too. I mean, I just mentioned the ones that I'd worked for or ones that I had seen recently. There's Palladium. There's oh God, I'm having a senior moment here, but there are a lot of them.
FHI 360, Save the Children, like all kinds of organizations. Yep. World Vision. Yep.
Yeah.
Abhi, the only thing I would add to that is that as you go through in life, in every stage, you meet a lot of people, and you make some friends and you make some acquaintances. And to the best extent you can, stay in touch, because they continue their paths and they mature and they grow in their responsibilities and in their organizations. And when I think about the group of folks I sat in Scots Hall with in grad school, in this little stable of beat up desks, they're all leading organizations at this point, and they're all making opportunities for new people to get jobs. So just, in terms of networking, it's not, you never know, Tom, to your point, and Charlene, you never know which friend is going to have that door that opens for you. It's, it's not about hoping that will happen. It's about just staying in touch and watching them grow.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's funny, one of our friends who is in grid right now, she just posted a message saying we should probably stay in touch just right now. So that's funny.
Bless her.
Okay, so yeah, that was a great end to that question. Edwin, over to you. You just have like 8 more minutes, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Abhi. I think the question that I know I've had and that others have communicated to me is, a lot of times there's this rift that exists between academia and the field, where there's a pull from the field because most people that are interested in development work want to work in the field. And then there's also this pull to be specialized because it seems like that's what's necessary to, actually get a footing in whatever industry that you end up in, whether it's in the private sector or it's in the development world. Do you have any advice in terms of how to mitigate this, sometimes conflicting pull from either? And any one of you could take it.
I'll start with my first thoughts, because this is something that I'm working on right now. I'm working with these group of CGR researchers who are working on all of these wonderful new applications and technologies. And when I ask them, well, have you talked to the private sector? Yeah, sure, but then when you find out they're talking to them was maybe they paid them to grow some seed, and not really ask them, is this seed marketable? This is where cross-functional teams, You know, I think for people who are in research and academia, there's so much value in what you do, but you need to be able to talk to the people who are going to get it out to not just the field, but get it out in the market, get it out to the people that need it. And just don't assume, as I said before, that if you build it, they will come, because they don't. They don't. You really have to start working with the people that you want to use your technology from the beginning. You know, there are a lot of market failures out there of very, very useful products that somehow just don't, you know, they don't take off because I'll give some examples in the world of grains. Maybe they take too long to cook, or, you know, white maize versus yellow maize. There are cultures that won't eat it, you know. So if you spend all your time doing vitamin A introduction into maize and you try to sell it in East Africa, it's a much longer haul. So this is where, again, the cross-functional team, eating maybe not humble pie, but just saying, okay, use your research, sit down with the people that you need to get it out into the field and come up with a plan. Last comment on this, I worked with through the Gates Foundation, Embrapa, which is a big research center in Brazil. Embrapa had a group of scientists who were willing to work with African scientists, especially young researchers. And as the person who was in charge of the grant, I would go down every year to Brazil and see their presentations. And I would ask, okay, this is a really, really nice project. I really like what you've done. What's your next step? Constantly, I was being told, I'm going to write my paper and get it published. And I said, yes, but that's not going to, who's going to read, who do you think is going to read this paper? So, I mean, it's this catch-22 all the time. So one of the things we instituted is that as new researchers came in, they had to hook up, even if it's an NGO that works with the private sector or that's working with people in the field, find out whether that product that you believe and probably is really good for people, is it going to be, are you going to be able to move it out the door, or is it going to sit on the shelf at one of the research stations? That's it.
That's amazing. Yeah, the academic bean counting does not help, and it definitely detracts from a lot of good work that could be done. Does anyone else have something to add?
Edwin,
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, Dale.
Quickly, the way you posed your question made me think about a T-shaped person. And in academia, we have so many pressures to become this part of the T, deepen a skill almost to the point of being the world's expert. And it's a very linear, high pressure path. Keep going, keep going, keep going. You know, don't take a year off to do that. Keep going. And the person that's like this is valuable from a program management point of view. But the person that has both, and you're aware that you have a good quantitative or scientific or sociological skill, and to Tom's earlier point, the ability to include other people, the ability to communicate, you know, to Charlene's point, the ability to read the market and bring in early partners. So I don't know that it's an either or, but frequently the conditions don't recognize the T-shaped, or the importance of being T-shaped, of being both.
Yeah, I would, Dale articulated kind of what I was thinking as well. I'll put it in a slightly different context, in that be aware of the skills that you have and not so enamored in the specific research project or specific question. I've worked with a lot of people, for example, who've done AI in image processing, and were able to translate that into understanding crop yields from satellite imagery, or evaluating nighttime lights. And so there's a lot of other uses for those skills that, like Dale said, if you're both the depth in the skill, you can find those other opportunities to have impact that may not be very specific to your research heart and love.
Those are all great answers. Thank you so much. And looks like we're at the end of our time here. So if anybody has any closing comments before we hand over to Rhonda, now would be the time. This has been a great conversation. We've loved having all of you. So thank you so much. Thanks to everyone that's attended. Over to you, Rhonda.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was a fantastic session, very informative and helpful. I'm sorry that we didn't have more time to continue with the conversation. I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking the time to speak with our audience today. And thank you, Abhi and Edwin. Thank the whole GRID team for all the time and effort that you've put in over the last few months. We appreciate your collaboration with our department. So now on—
Pleasure and thank you.
Oh, thank you. So now on to the poster awards. Before we begin, I need to share a small note with our students. I had a couple of students reach out because yesterday we tried to be creative and put all the posters into a slideshow. And while they looked fine on my computer, the formatting got lost when we ran it through a different computer. And I just want to reassure all the students that the judges saw your actual posters and your actual videos a couple of weeks ago, and they had no issues with them. So do not be concerned about that at all. And we had 17 posters in all, and they were very impressive. And I will send out the judges' comments to you later this week. Okay, so this is how this is going to work. As I'm announcing the winner, Joe with the Hall of Music will be showing the certificate, and then he will be playing the videos. So it's my honor to present the third place, and $250 goes to Sang Mok Park and Michelle Vispel on Ufrock with Purdue faculty lead Young Kim for their poster on M-Health blood hemoglobin assessments for resource limited settings.
Hello, my name is Sang-Mok Park, and I am a PhD student in Biomedical Engineering at Purdue University. Today, I am going to talk about M-Health blood hemoglobin assessment for resource-limited settings. Let me start with the background of our research. Blood hemoglobin test is one of the most fundamental clinical tests. This test is performed for various medical conditions such as anemia detection, cancer treatment, hemorrhage detection, and so on. Blood hemoglobin test is commonly performed through blood drawn by a needle. However, it can also cause iatrogenic blood loss. To overcome these limitations, we developed a new M-Health technology for non-invasive assessment of hemoglobin level. We are taking images of inner eyelids because of its easy accessibility and uniform vasculature. Spectroscopic spectroscopy transforms a smartphone into a hyperspectral imager. Then we can non-invasively predict blood hemoglobin levels using the spectral data. Let me talk about the concept of spectroscopic. In digital cameras, we get RGB images by multiplying camera spectral sensitivity and spectral data. The next equation is the inverse format of the first equation. We performed statistical calculations to get a conversion matrix, which is a key part of our spectroscopic resolution. By applying this matrix, we can mathematically reconstruct numerous spectral data points from just 3 RGB colors. After that, We had a clinical study in Eldoret, Kenya for 2 years. We worked with Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret. We got laboratory blood test results from 153 participants to validate the performance of our computational spectroscopy. The minimum level is 3.3 gram per deciliter, and the maximum was 19.2 gram per deciliter. By using the imaging system and smartphone, spectra and RGB datasets of inner eyelids were acquired. By using the dataset acquired from Kenya, Spectroscopic resolution algorithm was developed and validated. We compared measured and reconstructed spectra. When you look at two graphs on the top, x-axis is wavelength and y-axis is blood hemoglobin levels. Every single horizontal line shows the spectrum of each participant. Here we considered 3 cases: severe and mild anemia and normal cases. When you look at 3 graphs at the bottom, reconstructed spectra are in good agreement with measured ones, regardless of hemoglobin levels. Then we validated the accuracy of hemoglobin assessment. First, let me talk about spectroscopic hemoglobin assessment. When you look at the first column, this is the blood hemoglobin assessment result with measured spectra. The graph is the comparison between predicted hemoglobin count and blood test result. We can see the high prediction accuracy, more than 90% in the validation dataset. We also conducted Blend-Altman analysis. 95% limit of agreement, or around 1.5 gram per deciliter. When you look at the second column, we finally combined the spectroscopic resolution spectroscopy and hemoglobin prediction model. Blood hemoglobin levels were predicted using reconstructed spectra with spectroscopic resolution. The prediction accuracy is more than 90%, and 95% limit of agreement are around 2 gram per deciliter in Blend-Altman analysis. Lastly, let me briefly talk about our future work. We want to extend our research to measure bilirubin and extremely low level of blood hemoglobin, which are related to jaundice and sickle cell disease respectively. We are also interested in hemorrhage detection in battlefields and longitudinal monitoring of anemic patients for home-based care. Importantly, our ongoing NIH project is to enhance anemia control programs in India. Thanks for listening.
Congratulations. Our second place and $500 goes to Tammy Brandon, Alexander Kanakapa Cartagena, and Angelia Nunez, with faculty leads from Purdue, Chad Jaffer, and Inez Hua. The title of their poster is Chromium Remediation from Tannery Wastewater in Arequipa, Peru, using surface modified biochar.
My name is Tammy Brandon. I am a second-year PhD student at Purdue University in the Environmental Engineering Department, and today I will be presenting the project titled Chromium Remediation from Tannery Wastewater in Arequipa, Peru, using surface-modified biochar. This project is funded by the Arequipa Nexus Institute through Discovery Park Center for the Environment at Purdue and is a part of the Soil and Water Quality Subproject. As stated in its mission, the partnership between Purdue and the National University of San Agustin, or UNSA, is an effort combining research, education, and innovation to address key challenges to a sustainable future for the peoples of Arequipa, Peru. Tanneries present in the Rio Seco Industrial Park of Arequipa have a system of aqueducts that channel wastewater high in toxic chromium to oxidation lagoons as a method of containing the contamination. The oxidation lagoons are lined, as shown in Figure 2, but there still exists a potential for chromium to enter groundwater and introduce contamination, ultimately causing serious public health and environmental concerns. Biochar is an emerging low-cost sorbent useful for removing trace metals like chromium from natural and industrial waters, with the potential for selectivity, improved performance, and adsorbent recovery based on surface modifications, such as cationic surfactants or nano-zero-valent iron. Surfactants provide hydrophilic and hydrophobic functional groups at the surface that unmodified biochar lacks, increasing the adsorptive capacity and selectivity for aqueous toxic metals like hexavalent chromium. Current industrial wastewater treatment methods are designed to contain or remove the contaminants, but rarely provide a solution for resource recovery, leading to a missed economic opportunity for tanneries. Objective 1 of this project is to develop a method for biochar preparation modified with cationic surfactants to compare with established methods for chromium removal, such as nano-zero-valent iron surface-modified biochar. Objective 2 is to characterize the tannery wastewater in Arequipa, Peru through analytical methods like inductively coupled plasma, optical emission spectroscopy, ion chromatography, and others. By understanding the complexities of tannery wastewater matrices, we can gain knowledge on the effect of competing ions to further optimize the modified biochar to be selective for chromium. The selectivity for chromium coupled with the surfactant structure will ideally allow for the modified biochar to act as an ion exchange column that, when flushed with a highly saline solution, the chromium may potentially be recovered, thus introducing an economic incentive for tanneries such as the one located in Arequipa to use the technology. This work is incredibly important because a scalable and sustainable solution to mitigate chromium contamination can help to protect the over 1 million inhabitants in Arequipa, and if effective, the technology can be used in other impacted communities worldwide.
Congratulations. And our first place winner and $750 goes to Maria Ramirez, Carrie Kia Pandey, Lauren Nunez, and Rachel Gear, and Purdue faculty lead Ernest Blatchley III, expanding potable water access in developing countries through interdisciplinary learning.
Approximately 2.2 billion people lack access to safely managed drinking water, and 3 billion people lack basic hand-washing facilities at home. Our project exists to combat these sobering data and work toward accomplishing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is to ensure available and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. In 2012, faculty and students at Purdue University formed a project course to partner with rural communities in the Dominican Republic and work together toward providing safe, reliable water access for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and toilet flushing. Through funding from Purdue, Aqua Clara, Rotary International, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, we work alongside Dominican community leaders and elementary schools to install drinking water treatment systems and provide water, sanitation, and hygiene, or WASH education, to the school children and community members. Our design committee has created robust systems, as seen in figures 3 and 4, to utilize 2 methods of filtration and 2 methods of disinfection to treat water, removing harmful contaminants that cause waterborne illness. The first system we installed utilized groundwater, but once we learned that community members did not like the mineral taste of groundwater, we adapted our system to capture and treat rainwater instead. These systems are installed by a local plumber and electrician, utilizing equipment from Dominican hardware stores to ensure system sustainability. We also install hand washing stations at the school, as shown in figure 7. Our communications committee creates WASH education lesson plans to teach students about the importance of potable water and how to properly use soap and scrubbing techniques. One of our greatest challenges has been the integration of potable water access into the community's public health habits and current culture. Our goal is always to work alongside the community to continually ask how we can best provide safe water access in a way that is convenient and acceptable to them. Our Monitoring, Evaluations, and Publishing, or MEP committee, works hard to stay updated on current research concerning international development implementation strategies. Before we install a treatment system or write WASH education for a community, the MEP team conducts surveys and focus groups to gather data concerning the community perception toward water and hygiene. We have changed our system operation training as well as our WASH education methods as we continuously talk with operators and teachers at the school to learn how to best convey information within this unique culture. In addition to using local resources for system components and working with community members to install the systems, we have met with the Departments of Agriculture and Public Health to improve our project sustainability. The financial and cultural support from these Dominican departments has greatly benefited the project, as they can provide guidance on how to best implement this project in their communities, as well as encourage the community members to engage with us. The faculty and students that have participated in this project have spoken positively about the cultural competency, leadership, and teamwork skills they have gained, and many of them have gone on to work in international development. We look forward to traveling to the Dominican Republic when it is safe to do so, and we can continue working with communities to ensure safe, sustainable water and sanitation.
Congratulations to all of our winners, and thank you to everyone who submitted a poster. You should all be very proud of these projects. These projects have such an impact in the communities that you'll be working in, and you should all just be very proud. So that concludes our session for today. The Expo is taking a week off so that you can study for your finals, and we will pick back up on May 3rd through the 7th. Join us on May 3rd at 11 a.m., where we will have the seed grant semifinalists present their final proposals. Thank you to everyone who attended today. Have a good day, everybody.